All. I'm joined by the chairman and chief executive of the world's second largest employment services provider. That's Jeff Joerres. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here.
Jeff, first of all, tell me about the situation in the United States. And that's where you make around 10% of your revenue. But
Right.
You must be looking at all the proposals that Obama's putting through the healthcare reform very closely. Are people waiting to see exactly what's happening before they hire?
Well, we are in a situation where we really don't know what's going on. And I think you can see that by all the proposals coming in. By this time, you would already have seen a recovery. So we've been in business in the U.S. for over 60 years, and we can map each recovery. No doubt this one is very different. And it's very different because what we are seeing is companies are not only hesitant, which tends to happen, they're very exacting in what they want. They're not going to hire before the demand is there. In fact, typically it's demand, then hire. Whereas in previous downturns, and then the upturn came, there was some anticipation of hiring. So what you're seeing is that the demands for products and services, while starting to improve slightly, are not really improving enough. So you're going to see this kind of stagnation in the market of employment until we can really see the economy start to boost a little bit more.
Is there any sector in the States, but also here in Europe, that is actually hiring more than the others because they're more optimistic about their own future?
Well, there are clearly some very small pockets of companies, not so much sectors, that are optimistic. Which comes out first, which is very classic. We're seeing it in France, Germany, Italy, and the U.S.
What type of companies,
is the manufacturing.
Jeff? Is it the big? Okay.
Well, it is the big one. So it falls into a couple. It's big manufacturing that need assembly and logistics, because product is starting to move, and when it moves, you have to do it with more people. Whereas in the office environment and the professional environment, you basically say, well, yeah, things are getting better and you're working harder, but just keep working harder. And that's where you're seeing that productivity increase. So what we're seeing is somewhat of a classic recovery as where it's coming from. It's not classic, and the trajectory is much more muted than what we had seen in the past.
What about pay? Are these companies still willing to put the money to get the most talented people out there?
Well, they're willing to do that. I mean, people are, and companies are hiring every day. They're much more exact in what they're hiring, and they are looking at what our market data. So to go out and say, I'm going to get a new job for a 15% increase, you'd have to be a pretty big superstar to do that. We're seeing that there weren't many increases last year, and this year most of the pundits are saying somewhere about 2% increase in wages in the U.S.
Jeff, in terms of the countries, now we went through the United States. I know you make a lot of your business in France. How does that stack up with the UK and other European countries?
Well, the European countries actually came back a little earlier than the U.S., which was quite interesting. And part of that was they still had the consumer in the game, because redundancy is much harder to do than it would be in the U.S., so the consumer stayed in the game. The U.S. started to surpass it a little in October, November. What we're seeing is just a consistent growth, typically in logistics and manufacturing. One of the positive things we're seeing is some 700 offices that we have in France. Each office is a little bit better. So it's not just Toulouse, it's not just Nantes, it's all over that what you're seeing is a general improvement.